Most people don't regret moving to Connecticut. They regret choosing the wrong town. Because on the surface, a lot of places here look pretty similar. Good schools, nice homes, quiet neighborhoods. But the day-to-day lifestyle, that can feel completely different depending on where you land. And I've seen this play out way too many times. Buyers move here thinking they made the right choice. And 6 months later, they're already starting to second guess it. Not because Connecticut is a bad place to live, but because it's very specific in what it offers. And if your lifestyle doesn't match that, it can feel pretty off quickly. I work with a lot of relocation buyers, especially folks coming from Boston, New York City, Jersey, and what I've learned is this. The house is rarely the problem. It's almost always the location and the lifestyle fit that people didn't fully understand before they moved. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know before moving to Connecticut. How the state is actually laid out, where different types of buyers tend to fit best, and the biggest mistakes I see people make after they get here. By the end of this, you should have a much clearer sense of whether Connecticut is the right move for you, and more importantly, where in Connecticut you actually belong. And if you're already starting to think about making a move, I also put together a relocation guide that breaks down the best towns, pricing, schools, and what to expect when you live here. So if you want that, just check the link in the description and I'll send it right over. And if we haven't met yet, my name is David Constant. I'm a real estate agent who helps people relocate to the Hartford area and the surrounding suburbs, especially families and professionals who are trying to figure out what is the best fit for them. So if you're thinking about making a move, be sure you subscribe. And if you want help figuring out where you fit, my contact information is below. Let's start with why people are even moving to Connecticut in the first place. Because it's not random. What I'm seeing right now is a very specific type of buyer making the move. It's usually people coming from places like Boston, New York, Jersey, Florida, and on paper, they're doing really well. They've got good jobs, they're making good money, but the lifestyle isn't matching that. Everything still feels tight, expensive, and a little bit unsustainable long term. And that's usually the moment where people start asking questions like, is there a better way to live? And what I found is the move to Connecticut usually isn't just about location. It's about life stage. This tends to happen when people are thinking about having kids, or they already have young kids, or they just want more stability in their day-to-day life. And what they're really looking for is more space, better schools, and a stronger sense of community, and a lifestyle that feels much more manageable. And for a lot of those buyers, Connecticut feels like a reset. You can still get to Boston, New York City, but your daily life looks completely different. Instead of a small cramped apartment, constant noise, and everything feeling rushed, you get space, structure, and a slower, more predictable pace. But, and this is important, that lifestyle shift isn't for everyone. Because what some people see as peaceful, structured, and community-driven, other people experience very differently. Too quiet, too slow, and a little too unexciting. And that's where people start to get it wrong. Because Connecticut isn't just one thing. And choosing the right town and the right lifestyle within that is what makes the difference between loving it here or feeling like you made the wrong move. And that's exactly what we're going to break down next. Before we get into specific towns, you need to understand how Connecticut is actually laid out, because this is where a lot of people go wrong. Now on paper, Connecticut is a small state. It's about 5,500 square miles total, which makes it one of the smaller states in the country. To put that in perspective, you can drive across the entire state in about 2.5 hours. The population is right around 3.5 million people, so it's not tiny, but it's also not spread out like a lot of other parts of the country. And that combination of small geographically, but fairly dense, is what makes Connecticut unique. Because even though everything is relatively close, how it feels to live in each area can be completely different. At a high level, I like to break down Connecticut into a few key regions. Because once you understand this, everything else starts to make a lot more sense. Down in the southwest of the state, you've got Fairfield County. This is towns like Greenwich, Stamford, Westport, Fairfield. It's essentially New York's orbit. It's more fast-paced, more expensive, more commuter-driven. So if you want access to the city, higher-end markets, and more energy, that's where you'd look. But for a lot of buyers I work with, it's not where they end up. Then you've got the New Haven area. This is more urban in pockets, heavily influenced by Yale, more walkable than most of the state. So if you want something that feels more like a city, more vibrant, this can be a great option. But again, it's a very specific lifestyle. Now this is where I spend most of my time, in central Connecticut around Hartford County. And this is what most people picture when they think about moving to Connecticut. It's suburban, it's family oriented, and it's town-based living. You've got strong communities, good schools, and a really consistent lifestyle across a lot of towns. And from a location standpoint, it's one of the most central parts of the state, which is why so many buyers end up here. But, and this is important, even within this area, towns 10 to 15 minutes apart can feel completely different. And that's what we're going to break down next. Now, as you move northwest, you get into Litchfield County. And this is a completely different feel than everything else we've talked about so far. This is where Connecticut starts to feel much more rural and scenic. You're getting small towns, more land, rolling hills and farmland. And overall, it's just slower. It tends to attract buyers who are looking for privacy, second homes, people who want that true New England countryside feel. But the trade-off is clear. You're sacrificing things like convenience for space and quiet. Then you move down to the shoreline and you've got another completely different lifestyle. These are the coastal towns with a slower pace and more seasonal energy. And a lot of people love it, but it's not always the most practical for commuting. And then if you move even farther east, you get into more rural parts of the state. It's a lot quieter, a lot less dense, a lot more spread out, a lot more affordable. And for some buyers, it's perfect. But for others, it's a little too far removed. So even though Connecticut is small, it doesn't function like one uniform place. It's really a collection of different lifestyles, all packed into a relatively tight geographic area, which is why you can be 15 to 20 minutes away from another town and feel like you're in a completely different environment. And for most of the buyers I work with, that decision usually lands right here in central Connecticut. But within this area, this is where the real decision starts. So hopefully at this point, you're starting to see the pattern. You're not choosing between good and bad towns. You're choosing between different lifestyles. But what we just talked about, that tends to work best for people who are already in that suburban phase of life. So let's talk about the other side of this. If you're early in your career or not quite ready for that full suburban lifestyle yet, your experience in Connecticut can feel very different depending on where you land. And I want to be really honest with you here. Connecticut is not a high-energy, big city environment. So if you're expecting Boston or New York City, you're probably going to be disappointed. But there are places where it works really well. In central Connecticut, that place is usually West Hartford. And there are a few specific reasons for that. First is housing. This is one of the only areas locally where you'll find newer condos, apartment-style living, smaller, manageable, single-family homes, and even multifamily properties, which creates a really unique opportunity, especially if you're thinking about getting into homeownership. A lot of buyers I work with start here by living in one unit and renting out the other. It's one of the easiest places in the area to house hack your way in. Second is lifestyle. West Hartford actually gives you something to do. You've got West Hartford Center, Blueback Square, restaurants, bars, coffee shops. You can go out, walk around, meet people, and it feels very active. And that's not something you get in most nearby towns. And part of that energy comes from what's around it. You've got Trinity College, University of Hartford, UConn Law, University of St. Joseph, all within a pretty close radius. So there's a steady mix of students, young professionals, and faculty. And that means activity. Now, if you're open to being closer to New York City, Fairfield County offers a completely different vibe. You've got places like Stamford, South Norwalk, and Fairfield, all of which are a lot more connected to the city. You've got a lot more walkability, more nightlife, more energy overall. But the trade-off, it's higher cost, more commuter-driven lifestyle. So the real question then becomes, are you optimizing for your lifestyle right now or where you're headed next? Because I've seen people choose based on what feels exciting today, and then a year later, they realize they actually wanted more space, more stability, and a different pace. So it's not about choosing the best town. It's about choosing the version of Connecticut that fits your life right now. Let's start with West Hartford, because this is usually the first place people look when they're moving to the area. If I had to describe West Hartford in one sentence, it's the closest thing you're going to get to a city feel in central Connecticut. You've got West Hartford Center, Blueback Square, restaurants, bars, coffee shops, boutiques, and a level of walkability that you just don't see in most other towns nearby. And that's exactly why it's so popular. From a numbers standpoint, it's one of the more competitive towns in the area. When you look at things like median household income, around $125,000, home prices are in the $500,000 to $600,000 range, depending on the neighborhood. And in this higher income, higher demand market, it feels like it. From a location standpoint, you're right off 84, which makes commuting really easy. About 10-15 minutes into Hartford, 20-25 minutes from Bradley Airport. And that accessibility, it's a huge part of the appeal. It tends to attract younger professionals, couples relocating from Boston or the city, folks who want something to do day to day. But there's a trade-off, and this is important. You get older, closer to get houses, and you're paying a premium for location. Instead of buying space, you're buying access. Now, where people sometimes get it wrong, they choose it because it feels familiar, especially if they're coming from a city. But once they're here, they realize they actually want more space, a quieter neighborhood, or something that's a little less busy. And that's when towns like Glastonbury or Avon start to pop up on their list. So for the right buyer, West Hartford is a perfect fit, but it's not automatically the best long-term fit for everyone. Now let's talk about Glastonbury, because this is probably the most common alternative to West Hartford. If West Hartford feels like a small city, Glastonbury feels like a classic New England suburb. From a numbers standpoint, the median household income is roughly $135,000. And home values typically land around the $600,000 mark, depending on the area. So similar price point to West Hartford, but a very different lifestyle. From a location standpoint, you're primarily accessing it through Route 2, about 10 to 15 minutes outside of Hartford, and about 25 to 30 minutes to Bradley. And here's something that matters even more than people expect. You're on the east side of the river, and that impacts things like commuting, where you spend your time, and how connected you feel to other towns. Now, what you get here is more space, larger lots, quieter neighborhoods, and a stronger long-term residential feel. Schools here are consistently ranked among the top in the state, and that absolutely drives demand. And this tends to attract folks who are planning for long-term families, buyers who want space and privacy, people who are ready for that next phase of life. Now the key difference is this. In Glastonbury, your money buys you space and lifestyle. In West Hartford, your money buys you location and convenience. Now, where people get this wrong is the opposite of West Hartford. Some buyers move here thinking, I want quiet, I want space. And then they quickly realize it's really suburban. So if you still want energy and activity close by, this can feel a little too quiet. But if your goal is to put down roots, this is one of the strongest towns you can choose. Now let's head west into the Farmington Valley for Avon and Simsbury. This area has a completely different feel. If I had to sum it up, it's more scenic, more tucked away, and a little slower paced. From a numbers standpoint, the median household incomes are typically in the $130,000 to $140,000 range. Home prices anywhere from $500,000 to $700,000 depending on the property and location. And the location of the towns themselves, you're just off 84, but farther out, about 25 minutes from Hartford and about 35 minutes to Bradley. And that extra distance, you feel it. Not in a bad way, but in a lifestyle way. This area is more spread out, more residential, more peaceful day to day. And the schools here, they're among the top in the state. Avon and Simsbury consistently rank very high. So it tends to attract families who want a quieter environment, buyers who value space, people who are leaning into that New England lifestyle. Now the trade-off is convenience. You're not hopping between towns quickly or right next to everything. You're a little bit more tucked away, and where people sometimes get this wrong is they underestimate how much location impacts their routine. Because once you're here, everything takes a little bit more planning. But if your priority is calm, space, and a long-term lifestyle, this is one of the best areas you can be in. Let's talk about South Windsor, because this is one of the most practical and underrated towns in this entire area. If I had to sum it up, it's about balance. From a numbers standpoint, the median household income is right around $110,000. Home prices are in that $400,000 to $450,000 range. So right away, you're getting a lot more house for your money. And from a location standpoint, you've got easy access to 84, 291, about 15 minutes to Hartford, 20 minutes to Bradley Airport. So you're very centrally located. And the schools, they're very strong. Not always top tier ranked like Avon or Glastonbury, but still very solid and super reliable. And that's really the theme here. South Windsor is about practicality. It may not have the walkability of West Hartford, or the prestige of Glastonbury, or the scenery of Simsbury or Avon. But what it does have is value, convenience, amenities, and consistency. And for a lot of buyers, that's exactly what makes it the right fit. It's one of those towns that might not be the flashiest, but it checks a lot of boxes. So when you look at all of these side by side, you start to realize something. These towns aren't competing with each other. They're solving for different lifestyles. And the biggest mistake you can make is choosing based on price or reputation instead of how you actually live your day-to-day life. So let's talk about this from the higher price point towns. Because once you get into that $700, $800 million plus range, the conversation definitely shifts. At that point, you're not just buying a house anymore. You're buying a lifestyle. And the decision becomes less about what you can afford and more about how you want to live day to day and who you want to be surrounded by. In West Hartford at that level, you're typically getting a renovated home, prime location, walkability, and convenience. But here's the trade-off. Newer construction at the high end is very hard to find. Most homes are older, they're just updated and renovated. So even at that higher price point, you're still prioritizing location over space and privacy. In Glastonbury, that same budget usually gets you more space, more privacy, and in some areas, new or newer construction, especially in places like South Glastonbury. But what really stands out here isn't just the homes, it's the community. You're surrounded by professionals, executives, business owners, doctors, people who are here long-term and invested in the area. And you feel that in the schools, the neighborhoods, and the overall pace of life. And then in Avon and parts of Farmington, this is where a lot of the luxury market really concentrates. You've got areas like Avon Mountain, pockets of Farmington, and these are places that offer much larger homes, much more privacy, and more of that tucked away feel. It's similar to Glastonbury in that there's newer construction and it's actually available here. But beyond the homes, this is also where you start to see more of that lifestyle infrastructure. You've got multiple country clubs nearby, golf, private school access, and a lot of the people living here are executives, doctors, and even people connected to ESPN and major employers nearby. So if the environment itself feels very different, so at this level, you're not just choosing a house, you're choosing the kind of environment you want to live in and the kind of community you want to be a part of. Because both versions exist here. They just show up in different places. And this is the one I see all the time, especially with first timers, creating an artificial cap on what they're willing to spend. They say, why don't we go over X? And I understand that. But here's the reality of the market right now in Connecticut. It is highly competitive. The best homes are the ones that are updated, well located, and priced right, and they don't sit. They move fast, they get multiple offers, and they don't come around very often. So what ends up happening is buyers lose the right house by $10,000 or $15,000, which might be about $50 to $75 a month. And then they spend the next few months losing other homes, compromising what they actually want, or settling for something that isn't quite right. And here's the part that people don't always realize. Trying to game the system in a competitive market usually backfires. Being passive, waiting for the perfect deal, holding the line just to hold it, that's how you miss the house you actually wanted. And in a market like this, that house might not come back around. Now, I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money, but I am here to help you recognize when this is the house. Because buying in Connecticut right now is not for the faint of heart. It takes clarity, conviction, decisiveness, and the ability to act when the opportunity is there. And the buyers who succeed here, and there are plenty, are the ones who understand that. So beyond the towns, the prices, and all the strategy, what does it actually feel like to live here day to day? Because this is the part you don't fully understand until you're here. Life in Connecticut is a little more structured, a little more predictable, and a little more routine-driven than what a lot of people are used to coming from bigger cities. Your days tend to look like work, home, activities after school, weekends built around family, errands, and local events. And for a lot of people, it's exactly what they're looking for. It feels calmer, more manageable, more grounded. There's also a strong sense of community here. You've got town events, youth sports, local parks, seasonal activities, and over time, that becomes the rhythm of your life. It's less about constantly finding something new to do and more about being part of something consistent. And then there's the weather, which is something people always ask about. You're getting all 4 seasons here, no doubt. Spring and fall are beautiful. Summer's warm but manageable. In winter, well, it's real. You're going to get cold weather, definitely some snow, shorter days. It's not always extreme, but it's definitely something you need to be ready for if you're coming from somewhere like Florida or the South. And just like everything else we've talked about, this comes down to preference. Some people love the change in seasons. They love the structure, they love the pace of life. And other people miss the energy, the variety, the constant activity of bigger cities. Neither one is right or wrong. It just depends on what you are looking for. And that's really what this whole move comes down to. It's not just, can I afford a house here? It's, does this lifestyle actually fit the life I want to live? Because when it does, Connecticut can be an incredible place to live. And when it doesn't, that's when people start to feel it. So if you're thinking about making a move, timing is something that comes up a lot. And the reality is that there's no perfect time to buy a house in Connecticut. But there are different types of markets throughout the year. Spring and early summer, this is when you're going to see the most inventory hit the market. You're going to have more options, more listings, more opportunities to find the right fit. But like everything, it comes with a trade-off. It's also the most competitive time. More buyers, multiple offers, and homes moving very quickly. Late summer into fall, this is usually a bit more balanced. There are still good homes coming on the market, no doubt about it, but you might see slightly less competition compared to peak spring. And then there's winter, and this is where things slow down considerably. There's less inventory and fewer options, but sometimes better opportunities if you're willing to be patient. So it really comes down to this. Don't try to time the market perfectly. You just won't. Instead, focus on being prepared, understanding your numbers, and knowing what you're looking for. Because when the right house comes up, that's the moment that matters. And if there's one thing I'd leave you with, it's this. Don't just choose a house. Choose a lifestyle. Because Connecticut does a lot of things really well, but it works best for people whose life stage actually matches what it offers. And when that alignment is there, it can be an incredible place to live. If you're thinking about making a move and you want help figuring out where you actually fit in Connecticut, feel free to reach out. I also put together a relocation guide that breaks down things like towns, pricing, schools, and what to expect when you actually live here. And if you're serious about making a move, that guide will save you a lot of time and probably help you avoid a few mistakes we talked about already. And if this video is helpful, even a little, please make sure you subscribe, tap the bell for notifications so you don't miss any future videos. And I'll see you on the next one.